For decades, there was one television event that could bring millions of people across Europe together. It wasn't a championship match, it wasn't breaking news, it was a variety show. For generations of viewers, Wetten wasn't simply another program on television. It was a cultural phenomenon. Families planned their evenings around it. Celebrities from around the world competed to appear on it, and with audiences regularly reaching around 20 million viewers, it became one of the most successful entertainment shows Europe had ever seen. No one tuning in on December 4th, 2010 expected they were about to witness a moment that would permanently change television history. Because within minutes of broadcast beginning, one ambitious stunt would end in tragedy, live in front of millions. The concept behind Wetten was simple. Contestants would make unusual claims about skills they possessed, then attempt to prove them in front of a live audience. Some challenges were humorous, others just bizarre, and a select few demanded remarkable athletic ability and precise timing. The show's unpredictability became its greatest strength. One week viewers might watch someone perform an incredible memory challenge, the next they might witness an elaborate physical stunt that left audience holding its breath. That balance between entertainment and suspense kept people coming back year after year. Adding to the spectacle were internationally recognized guests, Hollywood stars, musicians, athletes, and public figures regularly appearing alongside contestants, turning every episode into a major television event. The December 2010 broadcast was no exception. Among the night's guests were actresses Cameron Diaz and teenage pop star Justin Bieber, whose global popularity was reaching extraordinary heights. Everything seemed set for another unforgettable evening, just not for the reasons anyone expected. Opening the show was 23-year-old Samuel Koch. Unlike many contestants, Samuel wasn't simply an enthusiastic amateur chasing a television moment. He had spent years training in acting and stunt performance, developing the athletic skills needed for physically demanding productions. He had already gained professional experience performing stunts and understood the risks that came with them. To the show's producers, he seemed like an ideal person for one of the night's most ambitious challenges. His task sounded straightforward, but executing it would require split-second precision. Samuel would sprint towards a series of moving cars and leap completely over each one while wearing specially designed spring-loaded boots. These boots used powerful fiberglass springs to increase jumping height and forward momentum, allowing experienced users to perform jumps impossible with ordinary footwear. The challenge wasn't just about jumping high. Every vehicle was slightly longer than the last, reducing the margin for error with each successful leap. The further Samuel progressed, the more difficult the stunts became. In preparation, Samuel practiced extensively. He successfully completed the sequence multiple times, but not consistently. Some attempts ended perfectly, others ended with awkward landings and falls. The difference between success and failure often came down to a tiny change in timing, a fraction of a second, or a few centimeters in takeoff position. It was difficult, but it appeared achievable. Confident enough to accept the challenge, Samuel made one additional request. He wanted his stunt to open the show. It would immediately capture the audience attention, setting the tone for the rest of the evening. So of course, the producers agreed. As the cameras rolled, Samuel's family watched from the audience. His mother sat in the stands with a microphone attached, allowing viewers at home to hear her reactions throughout the performance. At the time, it seemed like a touching production choice. Within minutes, that decision would become one of the most haunting parts of the broadcast. As the countdown began, millions watched Samuel prepare for the first run. Everything depended on perfect execution, and at first, it looked like everything was going exactly according to plan. As Samuel stepped out onto the course, the atmosphere inside the arena shifted. The lights dimmed slightly around the audience, leaving the brightly lit runway as a center of attention. Every camera in the studio focused on a single point, the young stunt performer standing at the start line. For a few moments, everything was still. Then the engine started. One by one, the cars rolled into position, each maintaining a carefully controlled speed. The timing had been rehearsed countless times. Every vehicle needed to be in exactly the right place at exactly the right moment. If either the driver or Samuel was even slightly off, the entire sequence would fall apart. The margin for error was incredibly small. Standing before him was 5 moving obstacles, each one longer than the last. Each one demanded a bigger jump. And unlike the televised stunts, there would be no second attempt if something went seriously wrong. Samuel took a deep breath. Then he began to run. The crowd watched almost silently, unsure of what to expect. At the final moment, he launched himself into the air. For a brief second, Samuel seemed to float effortlessly above the moving vehicle, before landing cleanly on the opposite side. The audience erupted into applause. The difficult challenge suddenly looked surprisingly manageable. If the first jump was any indication, Samuel appeared to be in complete control. But appearances can be deceptive. Without stopping, he continued towards the second vehicle. His eyes remained fixed on the approaching car, carefully judging the distance, speed, and angle of his approach. Then something unexpected happened. Just before takeoff, Samuel made a split-second decision. He aborted the jump. Instead of committing to the leap, he veered away at the last moment. To viewers watching at home, it may have looked confusing. Why would someone stop after clearing the first obstacle so confidently? The answer was simple. Samuel trusted his instincts. Professional stunt performers are trained to recognize those moments. If the timing feels wrong, forcing the stunt is often far more dangerous than stopping altogether. It was a smart decision, but it came with an unfortunate consequence. According to the rules of the challenge, skipping an obstacle meant there was no opportunity to repeat it. Instead, Samuel now had to continue with the remaining jumps flawlessly. The pressure increased instantly. After taking a moment to rest his focus, Samuel prepared for the third vehicle. This time, there was no hesitation. He accelerated down the runway, reached the perfect takeoff point, and launched himself high into the air. Another successful landing. The audience cheered louder than before. You could almost feel the tension easing inside the arena. 3 obstacles had been attempted, 2 remained. What most viewers didn't realize was the drivers inside the vehicles weren't random volunteers. Each car carried someone Samuel knew personally. Close friends had agreed to participate in the stunt, making the challenge feel less like a performance and more like a shared experience. As each vehicle approached, Samuel recognized the familiar faces behind the windshields. It added an emotional element to what was already an incredibly demanding task. Sitting behind the steering wheel wasn't a friend. It was Samuel's father. As the vehicle rolled forward, father and son locked eyes across the runway. Samuel raised his hand, and his father answered with the same gesture. It was a brief exchange, only a few seconds, but one filled with confidence. Neither of them had any reason to believe that these would become some of the most replayed moments in German television history. The countdown continued. The distance between them disappeared. Every stride had to be perfect. Every bounce from the spring-loaded boots mattered. Then, in a fraction of a second, everything changed.
Wehgetan?
Nein. Sofort den Arzt, bitte. Sofort ein Arzt.
Ja?
Sofort ein Arzt.
As Samuel passed over the car, the back of his head struck the upper edge of the windshield. The contact lasted only an instant. There was no loud crash, no shattered glass, just a brief impact that many viewers didn't even register until the replay. Yet that single moment would determine everything that followed. At first, it almost looked as though he might still recover. His body continued moving forward through the air, but something was terribly wrong. Instead of preparing for the landing as he had done during every successful jump before, Samuel's body seemed limp. He made no visible attempt to steady himself. For one horrifying moment, the audience didn't know whether they had just witnessed a minor mistake or the beginning of a disaster. Samuel hit the ground hard. At first, there was a sense of confusion rather than panic. From a distance, the collision with the windshield had appeared almost insignificant. It hadn't looked like the type of impact that should end a stunt. Many people expected him to get back up. Instead, he didn't move. The excitement that had filled the studio only seconds earlier disappeared instantly. Medical staff rushed onto stage as crew members surrounded Samuel. Around the arena, applause gave way to complete silence. No one knew the extent of his injuries, but everyone understood something had gone terribly wrong. One of the most chilling moments came not from the cameras, but from the audio. Samuel's mother, who had been fitted with a microphone before the stunt began so viewers could hear her reactions, watched helplessly from the audience. She immediately rushed towards her son, her fear captured by millions of viewers. Yet in those few heartbreaking seconds, the reality of the situation became impossible to ignore. The production now faced a problem unlike it had encountered before. Unlike many entertainment programs, Wetten was broadcast live without commercial interruptions. Once the show began, there was no scheduled break where producers could quietly regroup behind the scenes. Millions of viewers remained connected to the live feed. Inside the control room, difficult decisions had to be made almost immediately. The cameras avoided showing Samuel directly, instead cutting to wide shots of the audience and celebrity guests. The expressions on their faces said everything. Some stared silently towards the stage, others looked away entirely. No one seemed to know what to do. The atmosphere inside the arena had transformed from excitement into disbelief. Several agonizing minutes passed, and finally, host Samuel Koch returned to address the audience. Clearly shaken, he announced the broadcast would no longer continue. For the first time in the show's decades-long history, Wetten was brought to an early end because of an accident during a live performance. It was an unprecedented moment for one of Europe's biggest television programs. In the hours that followed, updates began to emerge from the hospital. Samuel had survived, but his injuries were devastating. The impact had fractured 2 cervical vertebrae in his neck and severely damaged his spinal cord. The diagnosis changed his life forever. He was left paralyzed from the neck down. Doctors immediately began emergency treatment, followed by the months of intensive rehabilitation. The road ahead would be unimaginably difficult, not only physically, but emotionally. There was another heartbreaking detail that resonated deeply with the public. Although every investigation could conclude that neither his father nor the driver had done anything wrong, many people could only imagine the emotional burden that followed. What had begun as a proud moment shared between father and son had become something neither of them could ever forget. In the days and weeks after the broadcast, questions spread amongst Germany and beyond. Could the accident have been prevented? Had the challenge been too dangerous? Or was it simply an unforeseeable tragedy caused by an incredibly small miscalculation? Experts later suggested that the brief contact with the windshield may have rendered Samuel unconscious. If that had happened, it would explain why he made no attempt to brace for the landing. Instead of protecting himself instinctively, he struck the floor with the full force of the fall. Sometimes, life-changing events are decided by fractions of a second. A slightly different takeoff, a few extra centimeters of height, one tiny adjustment. Any of those variables may have changed the outcome completely, but history doesn't allow for second attempts. For Wetten, the consequences extend far beyond that evening. The program continued for several more years, but many viewers felt the atmosphere had changed permanently. A show once associated with the excitement and light-hearted entertainment now carried the memory of one of television's most disturbing live moments. Host Samuel Koch later stepped away from the program, explaining that the accident had profoundly affected him. Although the series would eventually come to an end, many people believe its decline truly began on that December night. Not because audience stopped loving the show, but because they couldn't forget what they had witnessed. As for Samuel Koch, his story did not end in that hospital room. Despite facing challenges most people can barely imagine, he refused to let the accident define the rest of his life. He completed his education and returned to acting. He appeared in theatre productions, films, and television projects, proving that his passion for performing had survived even when his circumstances had changed so dramatically. He also became an author and motivational speaker, openly discussing resilience, faith, and adapting to a life no one could have prepared for. Samuel Koch's accident remains one of the most unforgettable moments ever captured on live television. A young man who lost almost everything, yet somehow found the strength to build a whole new life anyways. And in the end, that resilience may be the most remarkable story of all.